So, I have a theory, harebrained however it may seem. So, you've seen the title, you've seen the thumbnail, for whoever watches this. So, or skims past it and says, what is this? Okay, so a lot of different One Piece YouTubers have a theory that they tend to stick with. That is just like a fun little cockamamie harebrained theme theory that they've kind of come up with. Tekking has it that Kaido is a duck, and there's some other things that he's gone through. Grand Line Review has some of his own. A bunch of the other ones have various other theories that they have that they've come up with that are either semi-supported by what's already in the manga, or is just kind of fun thing of like, hey, well, look at what happened here, coincidentally, type of thing, way back in chapter 3 or something. That whole type of thing. So, they all have their own little harebrained schemes or harebrained theories and stuff like that for One Piece, which is fun to come up with, to be fair. They are very fun to come up with. And I have come up with a couple of my own. I made a whole video where I discussed whether or not Aokiji could be Robin's father, and then kind of disproved it myself anyway at the end a little bit, which was just funny. I did a video where I was just like, Homing may have been a Gorosei, or may have been considered for a Gorosei at some point in time. Given what we know now, I don't think that's true anymore. Homing doesn't seem like the type who would have been particularly interested in wanting to be a Gorosei, except maybe to use it to make change, but obviously that didn't happen. Same thing with Milzigard. He would have been probably more interested in trying to become a Gorosei to find a way to affect change, but again, that didn't happen, unfortunately. So my kind of newest harebrained theory that I've come up with, based on a few things here and there, and then just, I guess, wishful thinking, I guess, on my part, is a variation of Gunko is Moses, or is like a Moses-coded type of thing, type of person to a degree, and I'll get to some things about that. There's a lot of other various conspiracy theories that we've come up with for who Gunko is, and I'll touch on several of them, on a couple of them as we go through this. So there's that. Side note, this is the Bible I got all the way back when I was confirmed. Do I have a note in here for when that was? 2000. I got this back in November 2000. I've had this for almost 25 years. Yeah, I've had it for a long time. I've actually used it more in the last, year and, not quite a year and a half, but a year and some. Because I've been going to Bible study more with my dad because we started a course on women in the Bible. Going through and discussing all of the women who speak in the Bible. And for some, they have a fair amount to say. Other ones, it's like 4 words, if that. Varying degrees of that stuff. But taking a deeper look at the various women that are, have speaking lines throughout the course of the Bible, and discussing that type of stuff and how they kind of tie into each other and stuff like that. And I've enjoyed it. Moses has various women in his life that are very important to him. His birth mother, his adopted mother in the form of Pharaoh's daughter, his sister, his wife, that type of stuff. Some of which will be ones that I'll be going over in this video. So, yeah, I came up with a harebrained conspiracy theory for fun. We'll see what happens. So, just to see if for some reason someone had come up with a similar theory, I decided to Google it just for fun and to see what, see what the AI overview said about it. And I Googled, is Gunko Moses? And the results basically were based on the search results, there is no indication that Gunko is the same person as Moses. Gunko is a character in the Japanese manga and anime series One Piece. Technically, she hasn't been in the anime yet, but I get where you're coming from with that. Specifically, a holy knight and antagonist in the Elbath arc. Moses is a biblical figure who led the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt. There is no connection between the two figures. I just wanted to see what would happen if I Googled that, just to see what the answer would be. And it's kind of funny. I mean, like, technically you're right. But the other part of this theory is that Gunko may end up turning against the other gods' knights and that type of a thing, which we'll get to. So, into some of the facts that we know about Gunko, and I'll sprinkle in where they have like the theories that go along with this and point this out to various things that are comparable to Moses' life. For reference, we will be mostly focusing on what is written in Exodus, in the beginning of Exodus, for his, for anyone who wants to look it up. The beginning of Exodus is Moses' story. Not really going to be focusing too much on the end of his life, mostly the beginning and the part where he goes back to Egypt to free the slaves. If you want references to other things, we have the Prince of Egypt, which eventually I will end up reviewing when I review DreamWorks movies, but we have the Prince of Egypt, and then there is, of course, also the Ten Commandments, which I don't think I've ever actually seen the Ten Commandments. Eventually, I do kind of want to watch it, just because it looks pretty dang cool for what they were able to do with it at the time, for, effects and everything else like that. But those two movie references, you can kind of go with. Both of them kind of take some liberties here and there, and even, like, the Prince of Egypt states that, like, as a disclaimer at the beginning of the movie, that they don't follow the story in Exodus exactly, but that's what they did to tell a good story, but they admit it straight up. Which is fair, as opposed to some other places that are just like, yeah, no, we're just going to do whatever the heck we want. So, facts that we know about Gunko. So, first of all, Gunko. Gunko literally just means army child. So, to be fair, that may not be something that, like, a set of loving parents would have named their child. So, Gunko may not be her real name. It may have been a name that was, forced upon her by Imu, given that Imu has a good amount of seems to have a good amount of control over Gunko. Also, Gunko seemed to have her memories repressed, given what we saw when she finally had the connection to who Brooke used to be, or is. We also know that she is a member of the Manmeyer family, which is one of the 19 families that are in Marie Joie. We've really only seen one other member of the Manmeyer family that we are aware of, which we saw during the God Valley flashback, in Kuma's part of his flashback. And we don't really see much else of what they're able to do. We just see that they have a gun. That's about it. And Gunko does have the title of Saint. So Gunko-gu is the way that it's done in Japanese, and it's just like Saint or Saintess Gunko of the Manmeyer family. She is also, of course, a member of the God's Knights, which is why she is currently on Elbath, and holds that position. She's the only female God's Knight, to a degree, that we have at least seen at the moment. During the God Valley section of Kuma's flashback, we saw some other female celestial dragons that may have been members of the God's Knights as well, but that's not confirmed one way or the other as of this time frame. They may have just been other ones who were friends of Garling and were taking part in the human hunting games with them. We'll get back to the human hunting games later. Horrible idea. But they have that set up. Some other things that we know about Gunko's past. So, and this is also going to tie into some of the stuff that we know about Brooke's past as well. So, for like fact-wise type of things. So, fact-wise, we know that at some point in her youth, given what we saw in the most recent chapter, over 56 years ago, because we saw her in the flashback when Rox is in the flower room talking to Imu, we see Gunko there. 56 years ago, and she is already full grown. Like, she looks to be like the same age that we see her now. Now, we know that Emu seems to have the ability to grant eternal youth to people, not just eternal life or regeneration, but also eternal youth, as we saw kind of see with like Saturn and the other celestial not the other celestial dragons, and the other Gorosei. So we get that. So Gunko still being like that same age is like, well, yeah, that's fine. And she seems to be one of like Emu's trusted people who knows about Emu and is able to deliver messages back and forth from him to the Gorosei, or to him from the Gorosei, or like has at least the authority, enough authority to be able to be like, oh, Lord Emu, you had that appointment at whatever time frame, or you had that thing you wish to do, and not get like lashed out at, because presumably the same person that we saw during the reverie, who was in the room with Emu in the flower room, who came and like got Emu or told him something, is presumably Gunko as well. That's presumably the same person. Gunko, to be fair, members of the Gods Knights may also just know about Emu in general, because Garling seemed to know about Emu. And now that Garling is a Gorosei, he most definitely knows about Emu. So there's that. Shamrock, and we also see that Summers and Killingham also know about Emu, because when Emu takes over Gunko and also like speaks through their minds, they're like, oh, Emu-sama, or Lord Emu, or however they want to address it. They know who he is. So maybe not all of the Gods Knights know who Emu is, but at least some of them do. Shamrock probably does as well if he's one of the higher-ups within the Gods Knights. So over 56 years ago, given what we know about Brooke's past, and how young Gunko looks in like the little slice of a flashback that we get, where she just like that sliced bit of memory popping up of like little Gunko and Brooke, who is already like full grown, and we know it's Brooke just based on how he looks with the afro, the very tall, skinny, lanky, all that. Gunko looks to be between like 4 to 7-ish range, or 5 to 8-ish range, for how old she appears to be in this, which then extrapolating from what we know about Brooke's age, because Brooke is 90 years old, we know this. Tekking just confirmed it in his, One Piece trivia thing from Tekko, which I scored rather well on. When I watch the video, I do the pop quiz, the trivia thing to see what I can get. I think I really only missed 2 on that one. But back to this. So Brooke is 90. And if we extrapolate this back to, 56 years ago, from what we know about Brooke at that point in time, 56 years ago, he would have been part of the battle convoy. 56 years ago, Brooke would have been 30... No, wait. Oh, frick. I did the math on a bunch of this, and I forgot to do that math. So 90 minus 56... Brooke is 34, during at least that little glimpse into the flashback that we saw of Gunko then, and in the flower room with Emu 56 years ago. We go back, however many more years to, if we go back another 10 years, say. And, even if Gunko's been with the Celestial Dragons at that point in time, been in Emu's service for a few years at that point in time, we also don't know if Emu has the ability to, like, speed up someone's aging process, kind of like, how Bonnie is able to do it, or, like, how, like, the Seraphim seem to have, like, their aging process sped up a bit. The clones and stuff like that can have their aging processes sped up. So Emu might have the ability to do that. So it might have been like they found Gunko as a child and then like aged her up to an appropriate age to serve Emu. I mean, we've seen other devil fruits that can do the same thing. It's not like at the end of Wano, it's during the Battle of Onigashima. I mean, like Shinobu did the same thing to Momonosuke, aged him up to be 28 years old. So he was physically the correct age, but he's still only mentally 8 years old. They may have done something similar to that with Gunko, and if there's something about repressing her memories anyway, because her memories of Brooks seem to have been repressed, she may have just simply been not quite a blank slate, but enough of something that they could mold it into what they want her to be. So, going back, I did some of the math. If we go back to when Brooke is either 19 to 22 years old, possibly lines up fairly well with being able to be around Gunko when she's about 5 to 8 years old. That would land it during that time frame. About, 19 to 22-ish years old for Brooke. And that would still line up fine for her being able to be at that reverie serving under Imu. Also, shift that back a little bit or shift that forward a tiny bit depending on what we have to do if, once we get more information about when Gunko knew Brooke. Also, coincidentally, both Brooke being 19 and 22 both land during years that there would have been the human hunting game. So there's that. Which is fun. Not. So we have that. For a bit of context here for Brooke's backstory, we don't know the name of the kingdom that Brooke is from. We just know that he was born 90 years ago, and then at some point in time he was educated at some type of whatever school they had there, and that's where he kind of ended up learning about music as well and fencing and all of that type of stuff. I'll come back to the fencing in a little bit, and that's where a lot of his attacks receive their names, because a lot of Brooke's attacks are not named after his soul fruit. It's named after his return fruit, revive, whatever you want to call it. It's not named after that. It's named after different types of music, type of a thing. For all of that type of stuff. So that's where those names come from. So he had some type of formal education. Plus we also see him just reminiscing about yes, school days, the good old days of yore type of a thing. And we also know that eventually he was part of a battle convoy, that he was a leader of a battle convoy for a certain kingdom. We never get the name of this kingdom. We know that it's in the West Blue because Brooke is stated to have been from the West Blue. Either he states that or it's just stated in one of his Vivre cards. But it's also just, we know that then 52 years ago, 53 to 52 years ago, is when the Rumbar Pirates found Laboon, went up Reverse Mountain, ended up in the Grand Line, left Laboon with Crocus, and then headed off through the Grand Line with the full intention of coming back for Laboon. Unfortunately, we all know what happens. Yorkie gets sick, half the crew gets sick, they split up, Brooke becomes the new captain, they end up in the Florian Triangle, they end up fighting against some crew that uses poison weapons. I guess possibly the Rocks Pirates, but maybe not given what we've seen of the way that, Rocks tends to interact, and if that was the case, we probably would have seen it, and it probably would have been more of a Davy back fight, than just shooting him with weapons or whatever. Although, to be fair, maybe Rocks wants a musician on his crew as badly as Luffy did. That would be another parallel between the two of them. And, of course, we know they end up in the Florian Triangle. They get attacked by some other crew that uses poison weapons. They all end up getting poisoned. And then, of course, they all sing one more, playthrough of Bink Sake with them just as being sounding as happy and as joyful and everything as they can. And of course they record it on the tone dial, and then that plays through, and it ends up eventually going down all the way down to quintet, quartet, trio, duo, solo. Brooke dies, everyone else on the crew is dead, Brooke's the last one to die. Brooks, all their souls head to heaven or whatever, including Brooks. Brooks gets kicked out, heads back down, has to wander through the Florian Triangle for a year before he finds his body again, which is now just bones and afro And then he stays on the boat on the ship for the next technically 49 years during that time frame. And of course, eventually everything happens with Moria and Thriller Bark and losing his shadow to Ryuma, and then eventually meets the Straw Hats and blah, 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 blah. Bob's your uncle. I don't know, maybe Gunko's uncle is Bob. I don't know. Brooke seems to have some connection to, like, uncle version of Gunko, being like a version of an uncle to Gunko. So we'll see what happens there, but that's kind of some of what this video is about. And so we know all of that, and all of that would have taken place after anything that happened with Gunko as a kid already happened. Because when we first got this information of the little bit of the flashback that she knows Brooke, was the thought of, oh, maybe, I mean, like, the prevailing theory is that she's Yorkie's daughter, is the thought. Is, like, that's the most popular theory that they have going around, is that Gunko is Yorkie's daughter, because it's Calico Yorkie, and Gunko has hediochromia. She's technically the only character in One Piece who has hediochromia. I googled it, and for some reason it says that Caribou has hediochromia as well, and I'm like, well, his irises aren't quite the same way that a hediochromia person's is, but so I'm not counting him. Also, he's Caribou, and I don't want to count him for anything. But Gunko is like the only one who very much has the very hediochromia eyes, and calico cats are known for being hediochromatic. Not all the time, but a good chunk of them are. Again, a lot of that stuff there is stuff that's already been pointed out by other YouTubers who have discussed Gunko being Yorkie's daughter, or the possibilities there. Which I am fine with. I'm not arguing with that one way or the other. I think that would be the most reasonable one. There's also the theory that, like, Gunko was, like, the princess of whatever island Brooke had been from, and maybe he had been, like, her sworn protector. And that may have been in part of his battle convoy type of a thing. Since we don't know exactly when he was the leader of the battle convoy, beyond the fact that it was prior to him being a member of the Rumbar Pirates, and there's, like, 38 years of Brooke's life to account for before he becomes a Rumbar Pirate. In that time frame, 37 to 38 years to account for prior to being Rumbar Pirate he is. So there's that. But what ends up happening, or what we kind of concluded, was that, okay, well, she's either Yorkie's daughter, which makes the most sense given how close Brooke and Yorkie were. And we haven't gotten Gunko's official coloring in the manga. There's so many different pictures of, like, her with green hair, or her with blonde hair, or her with pink hair, or whatever other varying colors of hair you want to go with, just to, you know, have her be one of the varying ones, like, oh, this color or whatever. So, like, those are all over the place with, like, whatever hair color and eye color combination she's going to have for that. But what ends up, there was also a whole theory that, I think at one point in time there was the theory that she was the childhood crush of Kid and Killer. I think that was another one that was, like, a theory there at one point in time, that she was that girl that we found out about in one of the other SBSs and all of that. So there's that, which I'm like, I guess that could technically be possible, but Kid was born in the South Blue, and all of that would have happened long after the time when Brooke was dead and on the ship in the Florian Triangle, so none of that would have lined up anyway, so that theory is out of the window. Although, given what we had at the time, doesn't quite fit with what we, it kind of fit with what we had at the time, but other information has come forward. And obviously, there is quite the possibility that, like, once we get out of the Harald and Loki flashback and get back into the present for what is going on, that we'll learn something else about Gunko that just completely is like, oh, okay, well, this theory just got blown out of the, nope, this theory's dead in the water. Or maybe it'll be like, that just poured fire on that, or poured gasoline on that fire and made it bigger, so maybe that's helpful for me. But we'll see what happens. So, what we can deduce from there was also, I'm going to throw this in here, I know that there, I think, was also a thought that was like, is Brooke a celestial dragon? Because, like, when we see them in the silhouette, see him with the silhouette with little Gunko in the flashback, the sword that he has does not quite look like his soul solid, his rapier that he uses, his sword. It doesn't look like the same one like his cane sword. It looks like a more military style one. But it also kind of looked like the sword that Garling uses and that Shamrock uses, that type of sword. And I'm like, that's probably just a coincidence. That's more of like the sword that we see there does look to resemble more of like the type of sword that is just used by, military officers. And Brooke, as a leader of a battle convoy, would have just been a military officer of some kind. So there's that. So, as I already touched upon, there is, of course, the main prevailing theory is that she is Yorkie's daughter. Not Brooke's daughter, because if she had been Brooke's daughter, then when she has, like, the flashback come through and she's like, oh, Brooke, is that you? And she runs over, she tries to run over, she's not saying, oh, Dad, or Father, or something like that. It's, Brooke, is that you? And starts running back toward him. So there's that. So that's one of the thoughts there. As I also stated, some of these things were predicated on the fact that we didn't have Gunko's full title, and subsequently with the release of the latest volume, we have found out that Gunko's full title is Gunko of the Manmeyer family, Gunko Gu, for like Saintess Gunko type of a thing. And actually, she's, I believe, only the second female celestial dragon to be fully named. The first one was Shalria, who is Charlos' sister. Way back in Sabaody, was when she was first named, which was a good chunk of time ago. And so it's like, we kind of get that comparison there. And the connecting Gunko to the Manmeyer family, as opposed to just Gunko not having a connection to one of the celestial dragon families. Now, we know that there is always that we have learned subsequently that there is the possibility of having it be that someone becomes a celestial dragon. That was the whole point for York wanting to become a celestial dragon. To be fair, the Gorosei would not have fully ended up agreeing to that. And York is not going to become a celestial dragon. She is literally going to probably be chained up in some laboratory and forced to do whatever is needed, so that way Garling can get whatever he wants out of her. She deserves it. She betrayed her family, essentially, and herself. She betrayed herself, essentially, for what York did on Egghead. And for, Gunko and Shamrock, one of the whole reasons that they were on Elbath to begin with was to offer this position of a God's Knight of a Celestial Dragon to Loki. Now, we of course know that Loki turns them down, and Gunko takes great offense to this and just starts beating the crap out of Loki with her arrows. And, does so much of that, just beats the crap out of Loki with her arrows because she's angry at him for the fact that he is just like, you're denying the possibility, the chance to become a celestial dragon? Like, she's just, like, offended. Like, this is one of the most offensive things she's ever heard. Or the most absurd thing that she has ever heard. And given what we thought at the time, it's like, well, maybe that's because she was someone who was promoted from the lower realm up to being a celestial dragon. One of the other thoughts, I think, or at least one of the ones that I had at the time was, well, what if one of her parents is a celestial dragon and the other one was a slave? One of their spouses, very, very heavy on the air quotes there for spouses, the way that Ginny was to whatever celestial dragon had her. And maybe it was that, the thought that I had was that, well, what if this is the case and, like, Gunko's parent, who was a celestial dragon, this was, like, their favorite slave. And maybe they had enough affection for them that when they gave birth and had the child or whatever, they kept the child and was like, I'll keep this child. It will be raised as my child. Maybe not with the full rights of a full celestial dragon, but I will keep this child out of fondness or something like that. And then, whatever happened. We know with Ginny that wasn't the case, obviously. Whatever celestial dragon had gotten her as their wife, had gotten her as their wife, as his wife, clearly abused the heck out of her, got her pregnant, became, I don't care anymore, and then just left her and let Saint Saturn experiment on her, which Saint Saturn did, and that's why Ginny had the sapphire scales and everything else like that then eventually got passed on to Bonnie. And that leads us into all of Kuma flashback there for what happened there. God, that episode made me cry. Oh, God, I'm going to cry again whenever the English dub gets around to it. Just watch so many of them in the row. Oh, God, my emotional heartstrings. Oh, God. But, what we kind of got at that point in time was well, what if that's the case? That seemed to be a very unlikely case, but I remember that I brought it up, I think, in one of the videos when we were kind of learning about Gunko a little bit. Subsequently, more information we've gotten about her has changed some of that, because Gunko does appear to be a full member of the Manmeyer family, and it may still have been that she was someone who was raised up and adopted into that family by someone we don't know at Eames' behest. That was order given through the Gorosei to the Manmeyer family to, you will adopt this girl and you will raise her as a member of the Manmeyer family, and she will be a member of the God's Knights. Not pointing out that she will serve Emu, but she will at least be a member of the God's Knights, and that type of a thing at the time frame. We had a big thunderstorm roll through last night, so there's branches down outside, unfortunately. So for more stuff that we saw in the timeline, we know that 56 years ago we saw Gunko in the flower room with Eam when Rox made his way all the way to the flower room during that reverie. Coincidentally, that year was also a human hunting game year, which is just sad. And she's already full grown by then, or at the very least she looks to be about the same age that she is physically now in the manga in the present day during the Elbath arc. To be fair, she looks to be about the same age as Nami, Vivi. They might have her be 16, 17, 18 range. Nami is 20, so they might have her be 20 or something, physically 20. How Bonnie makes herself physically 21, 22, whatever that range was, that Bonnie physically makes herself look that age when she, ages herself up to, an adult. Which, side note, I love that she's not doing that right now in the manga during Elbath, and she's just more staying in her kid form. I'm sure if she needs to for, fighting purposes, she'll change back into, her adult form to help with fighting type of a thing, but she's much more comfortable being in her kid form now than she was in the past, because now she knows she can trust the Straw Hats, which I love. Plus, she's got her dad back. But someone also commented in regards to Gunko was that Gunko might be similar to Emu's Lady-in-Waiting. That type of a thing. We don't know the full set of how celestial dragon culture works in regards to what is fully proper and what is improper for the way that celestial dragons interact with each other. Clearly attacking each other is not good, from what Milzigard did to Charlos, or allowing another to attack a celestial dragon is not good, and that of course eventually resulted in Milzigard's execution, as we saw. But there was the thought that what if Gunko is Eames' lady-in-waiting and helps Emu and everything, that it's very common for high-ranking nobility, kings, queens, princes, princesses, whatever, to have some type of an assistant. For the queens and stuff like that, it's the ladies-in-waiting. For the females, it's ladies-in-waiting that help with them getting dressed, help with them doing various other tasks and stuff like that. And then the kings and butlers or kings and princes and stuff like that have like various butlers or things like that are like their type of an assistant that help with that type of a thing. And a lot of people are pointing out that, well, if Gunko is like a lady in waiting to Emu, then Emu might be female because it would be improper for a man and a woman to be left alone together. To point out the fact, 99.9999999% of the population do not know that Emu exists. Sabo knows. Wapol knows. Cobra knew. He's dead. All of the Goros say no. At least some of the Gods Knights know. And Sabo has now told Dragon and Vonkov. Rox knew. Rox is possibly dead. We don't know the full story there, but you get the idea. So, very few people of any type of know that Emu exists. So, Emu being male or female, being male and having a female lady in waiting isn't a problem. There's the thought that, like, oh, well, he keeps pretty women around, like Gunko around because it reminds him of Lily. Now, Gunko does not look like Lily, beyond the fact that, like, not all of Oda's female characters look alike, but some of them do. Who have no relation to each other. So there's that possibility there. Fair. We know that, I went through Brook's timeline already with the Reverse Mountain and Laboon and all of that stuff, and the Florian Triangle and all of that stuff. One of the things I wanted to point out is that Brook's sword style is very much based on fencing and Aido. I don't know that much about what Aido is, but he very much has his sword style is very much based on fencing. For how he works. Gunko, one of the weapons that we see her make when she's, getting ready to, when she's threatening Colin in front of Scopper, she uses her arrows to make what essentially looks like a fencing rapier. Now, I'm no expert when it comes to fencing rapiers or anything like that. Closest thing I'm familiar with when it comes to fencing is probably The Princess Bride. And the sword fight there between Wesley and Inigo Montoya is probably the closest thing. Although, to be fair, we did attempt fencing. I think it was in middle school at one point in time with all the gear and everything else like that. I didn't mind it so much. I just would have preferred not to have to wear so much gear that other people had also worn. And I don't know when the last time it was cleaned was. But so they have that type of a thing. So Gunko having her, molding her arrows into a rapier type sword may have been a subconscious reference to Brook, particularly if she ever watched Brook train or watched Brook fight or something, or saw him use that type of a sword style all the time. That may have been something that was just subconsciously there. The other thought that I had is, so there's that connection there. We know that Gunko has some recollection of Brook. We see that when she knocks Scopper off of the branch after he, stops and doesn't fight her anymore to allow, Colin doesn't get hurt. And, she shoots him with the arrows and knocks him off, and then Colin's screaming for his dad. And then that unlocks something inside of Gunko's mind where she hears, has this, hears herself or whatever screaming for her dad, daddy, daddy type of thing. And then we see her with the silhouetted figure that is clearly supposed to be Brooke saying, I've always wanted to be a pirate. I can't talk like Ian Sinclair, I'm sorry. I've always wanted to be a pirate and everything like that. And the little Gunko, and even in the silhouette thing, I think it looks like there's musical notes around. Yeah, there's musical notes literally around them as they are walking and talking. With Brooke holding her hand. So there's that. And like, so we have that connection there that they have with music to each other. And Brooke, of course, is a very musically based character. We see this throughout, his flashback. Almost all of the Rumbar Pirates flashback that we see with Brooke, they are playing music of some kind, either for Laboon or just having fun and playing it for each other. Heck, Brooke and the crew die playing Mink Sake one more time to record for Laboon on the tone dial. That's how they end themselves. That's how they die. Well, they don't end themselves, but that's how they choose to meet their end. I will put it that way. That's a better way of putting it. Is singing that way. Is singing this song that meant so much to them, that they know meant so much to Laboon. And Brooke still carries that song, that recording around in the tone dial in his head. And such. So we have that. We know that is something that means so much to him. And his fighting style itself involves music. For how he uses his lullabies, and how he uses his, like, all of his attacks, or almost all of his attacks are named after music of some kind. Some type of music, a lullaby, a melody, something. During the 2-year time skip, he forms this whole persona as Soul King Brooke. And has, these, TDs, the tone dials and everything like that with his songs on it that just go all over the place. And he is just this huge hit. And he's got such a huge fan base. And Gunko is one of those fans. Now, there's the whole question of whether or not Gunko just simply became a fan of Soul King Brooke because she just legit liked his music, which is fully fair. That led into a whole bunch of stuff that we thought was going to happen when it came to Gunko and Brooke, when we first found out that she was a fan of his, because we see her listening to, New World on the tone dial and everything, and Summer's like negging her on it, and then Killingham's like, don't knock someone else's music. He's like, fine, type of a thing. And, we know that Gunko really likes those songs and everything else like that. And then we saw when she first interacted with Brooke, well, not directly when she first interacted with him, but after she had all the Straw Hats tied up and had captured Colin and sent him to go be with the other kids, she, looks at Brooke and is just like, threatens him of just like, become my slave, my only slave, and you will make and perform music only for me, essentially. And Brooke says no. Brooke straight up says no. And even during that interaction, a little bit before that and everything, or after that, we have Brooke, like, sitting there tied up, and is like, it can't be her. Like, she looks so much like, but it can't be her. It's like, that's impossible type of thing for, like, how could she be here? And if that is Brooke recognizing Gunko, because we don't know exactly when the last time he saw her was. It might have been when she was, like a preteen, or like just starting to be, 15, 16, whatever, and, entering that part of her life or whatever, the last time that they saw each other in the flashback when she's screaming for her dad, it looks like she's at least like 14, 15 range, but given how Oda draws women in One Piece, that's a little bit debatable about what age they are, because Rebecca and Nami and Vivi, well, okay, Rebecca and Vivi are the same age, but like Vivi and Nami and some of the other female characters that, even like Robin, I love Robin, but she does not look like she is 30. But, like, they look like they could all pass for, like, the same age type of thing. Or, excuse me, Vivi and, no, Vivi's 18. I don't remember. Forget it. Moving on. But, she looks to be at least somewhat close to the age that she is physically now when we get that little blip of a flashback with her screaming for her father. And she may just have not a lot of, because we don't know the last time that Brooke saw her. And even if it was the last time he saw her, she was alive. Then he thought she died or something, it would be the combination of like, well, that can't be her because she's dead. Or, wait a minute, how is she here? Or how does she not look like she's aged a day if she was alive the last time he saw her, which would have been over 56 years ago, as I previously mentioned. The other side of that is that somehow Brooke knows about the effing God's Knights because he mentions it. And that could have been something where it's like in his, time frame as a battle convoy leader, maybe not he interacted with the God's Knights, but maybe he escorted his kingdom. And then there's the whole thought that like maybe Brooke is connected to God Valley. And I'm like, I guess that's possible. They're both from the West Blue, but still, they're both in the West Blue. So that's a vague possibility, depending on how you want to look at it. But like, so there's connections there possibly. And like if what had ended up happening was like, Brooke was a leader of a battle convoy, maybe he was selected to go to Marijois with the leaders of his kingdom, with the rulers of his kingdom, to go to Marijois as part of a reverie, 60 years ago or whatever the case was. And if Gunko was the princess or whatever, then maybe Emu took a shine to her and ripped her away from them. And maybe Yorkie was there as well and ripped Gunko away. Maybe Yorkie was the freaking former king of the kingdom for all we know. And had that connection there. I don't know. But so there's those connections there. And we know that, as I said, Gunko was a fan of Soul King Brooke, still is. She's just possessed at the moment now by Emu. But there's the thought that I had, and I'm sure other people have had this thought as well, is that what if once they are able to free Brooke and the rest of the Straw Hats that were captured by Gunko, that are tied up in her arrows, that once they're able to free them, that Brooke will be like, wait, I know her. It has to be her. Like, it has to be like insert whatever her actual name is, not Gunko, but whatever her name is. And he's like, it has to be her. And they're like, Brooke, what are you talking about? And he's like, she was Yorkie's daughter, or she was blah, 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 the daughter of the king, or whatever title, that she had that connected her to Brooke. And they're like, but how is she? I don't know, but I have to go help her. And like, they have to deal with like all the dummy reversing and everything. And what would be very awesome is if Gunko is, as possessed by Emu, if Brooke starts playing, like maybe he starts playing Bink Sake. Maybe that was like a song that she really liked, but starts playing Bink Sake. And like, maybe it kind of like gets some reaction out of Emu. Maybe it's a combination of like Emu's rage if this song is something that has plagued them for like 800 years since the Void Century, because it's a connection to the Void Century, which would just add fuel to that fire, for it being like a way of passing down the story about Joy Boy and Laugh Tale and everything else like that with Bink Sake and that connection there. Or like there's like a glimpse of like Emu like losing some control over Gunko, and like something of like Gunko flashes back into control for a moment and like says Brooke's name, and then is pulled back in by Emu to fully possess them again, and then maybe Brooke's like, and then switches to something else, switches to a different song, maybe a song that Brooke or Yorkie specifically wrote for Gunko. And I'm gonna pull up a Pixar reference here. In the movie Coco, and I've talked about this already, I loved Coco. They did a great job with the movie for the Pixar movie Coco. Go watch it. I've already done a whole video where I discussed memories in media, and I'm pretty sure I brought up that for how Dia de los Muertos and everything like that power, for like memories power the people who are in, the land of the dead. Did a whole video also where I was comparing Brooke to Coco as well. And in the movie, there is the song Remember Me that is used throughout the whole movie. And at the end of the movie, we find out that the song Remember Me was written by Hector for his daughter, for Coco, so that way no matter where they were, he could sing it and she would know that it was for him, or that she would know that it was for her. And we have this moment, and then when Miguel makes his way back home and gets his grandfather's guitar, he gets there, and he's finally able to start playing Remember Me the proper way, not the pop version, dancey version or whatever that was used earlier in the movie. But he starts playing the version of it that was for Coco. That makes her memories, and she is like this very like Alzheimer's, losing her memory type character, is where she is as his great-grandmother. She's like 99 years old. And he starts playing and starts singing, and she remembers, and she has all these memories flooding back of her father and all of that stuff, and we see the two of them singing together. And what if it's something similar to that? I don't know how much Oda is aware of. I'm sure he knows what Pixar is. That would be a hard thing not to know what Pixar is. Plus he has two daughters who probably are like, Dad, let's watch, a movie or something like that whenever he's home. The rare occasions that is. And this would also be something that would tie into this whole thing of like fathers and daughters in One Piece that we see that has become more prevalent throughout the course of the story. And what if Brooke starts playing this new song that we have never heard before, and like Oda puts in the lyrics and everything, and he's like playing it and everything, and like we see Gunko start to come out of being possessed, start to come out, is like fighting back against Imu, is like, we see like the, the hair the eye color shifting back and forth from like, Imu's, red eyes to like Gunko's hediachromia, and like shifting back and forth, and seeing Gunko clearly trying to fight her way out of being controlled by Imu. And maybe she is able to, with like Brooke's help, with like Brooke playing, and maybe with bring Luffy in on this as well, with like him getting his, in his sun god form, maybe Bonnie in the sun god form as well, helping with like Domi reversey, unreversey Domied, the giants and stuff like that, with like them able to help with that somehow, with like, flipping the pieces back to being white instead of black and freeing the giants, however variation of that you want to go with. And they're able to do that, and like that combined with Brooke's song, maybe somehow the Drums of Liberation gets mixed into the song somehow. That would be funny. But like all of that together is something that helps pull Gunko out of being this possessed by Imu, and allows Gunko enough time frame to like forcibly send either just straight up end Summers and Killingham, like suck away their immortality, their regeneration ability, suck that away from them enough so that way they can be defeated by the Straw Hats or the Giants or whatever, so they're taken care of, or just uses it to like force them back through the portal, and then just like forcibly close and seal off all of the portals that were to Elbath, like the one in the castle type of a thing. Just like forcibly get rid of all of that stuff so they can't get back to Elbath again. So it's like the abyss is cut off from Elbath. And then either maybe that's how Gunko sacrifices herself or something like that, ends it that way, gets like a chance to say goodbye to Brooke, and we get like more of a flashback there. Like a good way of like showing their flashback together would be to have it be like playing with the music. And like the anime would just love that. I can assure you of that with how they handled Kuma and Bonnie and all of that stuff. Just like all of that stuff, just like throw this in there as well, and to like work with that. So that would be a good way of doing that, in my opinion, because we know how much Oda loves music. I mean, like Film Red was something that he very much enjoyed getting to work on and everything. And this connection there to music. So there's a lot of that, and either just straight up ends them or just forces the other two celestial dragons, forces them back, and like finds a way to like sever Gunko's connection to Emu. Maybe that's removing the abyss mark. Maybe that's doing something else. And then like all of the, what we saw with Saturn, all of the years that Gunko has that have been held back while Gunko is eternally young come rushing forward, and she ends up being in like her 60s or 70s or something like that. And like Brooke is just like, you're just as adorable as you were the last time I saw you, type of a thing. Something like that. And then like maybe Gunko doesn't quite get, it's not a full happily ever after because maybe she's still really badly injured. But to be fair, they have Lilith there and Chopper as doctors and Gerd and all of that stuff. So maybe Gunko would be fine. I don't know, but we'll see what happens there. But like, so there's that. The connections that I wanted to draw in regards to Moses for Gunko was that very famously, of course, in the Bible and in various other media where we have Moses depicted, is that he is the son of Israelites. He's a child of the Israelites who have been enslaved in Egypt. After Joseph after Joseph brought all of the Canaanites there, all the Jacob and his sons and grandchildren and all of that stuff, brought all of them to Egypt to help them survive the famine. To be fully honest, last week when we saw Joseph in the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, which was great, they did a great job with, by the way, this idea popped into my head because we were discussing something on the way home and trying to like explain to my niece. My dad and I were trying to explain to my niece kind of where the end of Genesis, which is the end of Joseph's story, is the end of Genesis, moves into like that's where Moses then comes from, because he's a descendant of the Israelites that were there a few generations down the line after a new pharaoh comes to power and has forgotten about what Joseph did for the people of Egypt. So Pharaoh eventually sees the Israelites as a threat and wants all of the boys killed and drowned in the Nile. So that's what his plan is. He sends his guards to go and do this. Moses' mother, Yocheved, I think is the way that you pronounce it, she takes her baby, Joseph, after having hid him for a little while. She takes him, puts him in a basket, and covers it in stuff so it's, safe, and puts it in the reeds. Eventually, Pharaoh's daughter comes by and finds the basket in the Nile and takes the baby out of it, decides she likes the baby. She's like, oh, this is one of the one of the Hebrew babies. And Joseph's sister shows up, who is Miriam, who is his older sister. And she's like, yeah, should I go get one of the Hebrew women to nurse him? And she's like, yes, go do that. And then, so Joseph does technically still get to be, Moses still technically gets to be partially raised by his own mother. Eventually, once he's, a bit older, he's taken back to the castle, back to the palace, where he is then raised as Pharaoh's daughter's son, as like one of the princes. Now, I have to point out here, if Pharaoh had no idea that his daughter wasn't pregnant and then somehow shows up with like this kid that's like, I don't know, 2-3 years old, and I would have questions. I would have many questions if I was Pharaoh or Pharaoh's wife, the daughter's mother. Like, I would have so many questions. And I will point out that in the Prince of Egypt, they do all of this, and like Moses is just taken in. It's like he's not sent back to like partially be raised by his actual mother or anything like that. He's just adopted into the royal family, and they have it be Pharaoh's wife that picks him up out of the water, and then it's just like, we'll go show Pharaoh your new baby brother Moses, type of thing. So we have like that connection there. Again, the movie takes some liberties, which is fair. But like Joseph is then like raised either way. He's then raised in the palace as a member of Pharaoh's family. And like I actually asked my dad this question last night or the other night. I'm like, so how aware was Moses that he would have been a Hebrew? That he would have been, an Israelite? How aware of that would he have been? Like that wouldn't be like public information because that would have been very dangerous to him. Should someone find out. And Dad's like, I don't think he would have known because that would have also just been a threat anyway, that it might get revealed. And I mean, in the movie, in Prince of Egypt, Moses has like a wig that he wears and he keeps his brown hair cut short. So assumedly it's just like, oh, it's a recessive gene or something like that. It's just like, yeah, just wear this wig so you look like you're, part of the family. And he does. And we don't really get a full explanation as to why, whether or not Moses is, aware of himself, of him being a Hebrew. In the movie, he has no idea. In the movie, he does not find this out until he ends up coming across Miriam and Aaron, who are his older siblings, his brother and sister. And in the movie, he comes across them, and then Miriam sings the song or hums the melody that Joseph has known all his life because it's the song that his mother sang to him, putting him in the basket and sending him in the river. So we have that connection there. And Joseph has like this then internal crisis that he goes through. And in the movie, they do a great job of portraying this. I don't know how they portray it in the Ten Commandments. As I said, I have not seen the Ten Commandments. And then in the Bible, they don't really go over that. They just say, like, it cuts to Moses is now grown. And at one point in time, he was out watching them work, watching his own people is the way that it's phrased, at least in the translation that I'm getting here, is he's watching his own people, in their hard labor. And it's like, well, there's a difference there if you're like, oh, well, these are just the slaves that we have, and it's their job to, build our temples and everything else like that, as opposed to knowing that these are the same people that share his blood, that they could be related to him, and in a sense they are, as all children of, Jacob, in that sense, which is the full story that's in Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, because Jacob is Joseph's father, and he's the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. Go that way. But it's like this whole question of like, does Moses know? And in the Bible, I don't think it's ever stated one way or the other. It's just said that he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. So at some point in time, he either finds out that these are his own people, or it's just emphasizing this in the Bible, and he doesn't find out until later or something. So he then eventually ends up killing the Egyptian guard and then burying him in the sand. Which, of course, then eventually leads into Pharaoh finding out. And then, Joseph, or not Joseph, I keep saying Joseph. Moses then runs away into the deserts of Midian, which is just another area where, of course, he is eventually found by the Midianites. And then, of course, eventually gets married to Zipporah, whose father is like the chief of the Midianites. And, of course, eventually then Joseph has the interaction with the burning bush where he speaks with God, and then he goes back to Egypt to demand, that Pharaoh free his people. I don't know if in the actual story, if it is the Pharaoh that was like his brother or something like that, but he does return and, of course, demands that his people be freed. And, all the plagues end up happening because, of course, Pharaoh says no again and again and again. And eventually it's just like, okay, last plague, reaping of souls, all of that stuff, firstborn child die, all of that stuff. And then, of course, eventually they are freed because now, Pharaoh's own child dies in this epidemic and in this, in the Passover setup that they have. And they go through all of that. And then, of course, they are free and they make their way eventually out of Egypt, cross the Red Sea, and into a new area, where they then wander in the desert for 40 years and complain. Um, so that's what happens there. But, like, if it is that Gunko is this, and I'm not saying that this is an intentional thing that Oda would do, but if it's Gunko is this person who is most likely low-born in the eyes of the other celestial dragons, as someone born from the lower realm, is brought up to, their realm, up to Marie-Joie, told to be adopted into one of the royal families, into the Manmeyer family, and raised there, probably has, like, Gunko's memory suppressed by Emu. Side thought. No, that wouldn't work. I was gonna say something about, like, if they had the pawpaw fruit was one of the prizes during the human hunting game that we saw during God Valley, which would have been more than enough time ago for the person to previously have it to have, lived and have died, and then they still have the fruit, or they found it or whatever. I was gonna say, well, what if they, like, the previous user of it, pushed out Gunko's memories or something like that. But that's not what happened with Kuma. He was able to just essentially copy his memories. He still had all of his memories, so that's a bit of a different thing. I guess maybe it could have been something to do with, like, the previous user of, like, the Memo no Mi that, like, Pudding has, where it's, like, edit the person's memories and essentially strip out things, but we don't know the exact extent of, like, what Pudding's memory manipulation can do. I've discussed that, I think, a few times. It's like it could possibly go that far because we don't see, like, the full extent of what she's capable of, but you get the idea. But eventually Gunko is raised up, put into this situation, was on whatever kingdom that Brook was from. Maybe they had the human hunting game there, and by some chance, Gunko ended up catching the eye of someone, or maybe, like, whatever Gorose member was down there for that human hunting game. Maybe they alternate. And they were down there for the game because we know Saturn was at the one at God Valley. Maybe they alternate, and maybe one of them ended up coming across Gunko or sensed Gunko and saw that she would be a good compatible host or something like that for Emu if needed. And they're like, yeah, kill everybody else. Bring me her, type of a thing. And then, like, she's taken in, and whatever the case may be. Since we don't know the full setup there, it could have been something else. Maybe she was at Reverie with Brook. Maybe she was the daughter of one of like, the king of the kingdom, and they took her away at Reverie. Like, Emu sensed that there was a compatibility there, and it was just like, get me that child type of a thing. And they drag her away, and, Brook and Yorkie or whatever are, like, forcibly ejected from, the Reverie at that point in time and kicked out of the Reverie. All of that stuff, which could very much play into the God Valley setup in that regard as well. But, we saw the king in God Valley. He got nixed, or garlinged, as the case was. And goes through that. So it's just like, okay, well, what else is there? And, like, so Gunko goes through all of that, has their memories repressed or whatever, and then ends up going through and is, trained and raised in how to be a celestial dragon, and how to be a god's knight, and how to use her devil fruit to the best of her ability. She is very, very good with it. No argument here. In her definitely having mastered it. We don't know if it's awakened, but at the very least mastered it, to the point where she probably could awaken it. And then goes through all of that, is this loyal servant of Emu, the same way that, like, Moses is semi-portrayed to be, like, this loyal person to Pharaoh, depending on how much Moses is aware of being a Hebrew or not. And then eventually what is going on now is that, of course, Gunko finally had something snap. Something snapped enough in the repressed memories. Maybe it was slowly getting worn away at by the fact that she liked Brooke's music as Soul King, and like listening to that enough maybe helped semi wear down some of those walls, might be a good way of putting it. And then finally, when the connection hit with like Colin screaming for his dad as his dad falls to possible death, and has like, screaming dad, that clicked with Gunko, and it finally shattered enough of whatever barrier was there holding back her memories, that she has like these core memories of like being with Brooke as a little kid, and then like something bad happening to her father, something happening to Yorkie, or whatever the case may be, and she remembers Brooke, and it's like clicks in of like Brooke, like Soul King Brooke, like Brooke over there, and then is like, Brooke, is that you? Like running over to confirm. It's like, is this a coincidence that his name is Brooke, or is it this is Brooke that was like my uncle, my protector, my dad's best friend, whatever the case may be. And she's trying to run over to get to him, and that's right when Emu is like, nope. Just like possesses Gunko and forces everything that way. So there's the thought there. And then, of course, like a way to bring Gunko out of that would be to have Gunko, have Brooke play his music in, in the Bible and in the Old Testament, there are connections to songs. There are the Psalms and stuff like that are semi meant to be sung and such. So there is connections to music in the Bible. There's so many different hymns that are associated with church. And there's, even in, Judaism, there is, music that goes along with that. With every religion, or most religions in some shape or form have varying types of songs that are part of their worship in some form. And such. And, having this connection here where it's just like, Gunko then, if she breaks out of this possession, then turns on Killingham and Summers and either just straight up ends them or forces them back to Bourgeois and cuts away any connection to Bourgeois, to the Abyss being able to get back to Elbath to protect Elbath. And then that would just leave, find a way to, undummy reverse all the giants that got dummy reversied and get rid of the nightmare monsters. Which, without Killingham there, means that they can't be resurrected, and that they'll eventually just like go away if you just like, destroy them enough, defeat them enough, type of a thing. And like have that connection there. And, the same way that Moses kills one of the Egyptian guards, and then eventually like maybe Gunko maybe still has her devil fruit power. We don't know the full extent of that, to how connected to Emu that would be. Or maybe it's Emu, like Gunko has to like seal the Abyss gate with like her on the other side, so that way they can't go back, type of a thing. And like she, the whole thing of this like, I have to go now, Brooke, but I'm sorry, and come find me, and then like closes the gate on their side with her on the other side with the other celestial dragons, and then gets like captured, and then Brooke's like, okay, I want to go help save her, type of a thing. I know that there was also the whole thought that Gunko was Shaggy, was going to be like the person that that Loki's talking to on the Den Den Mushi is going to be like Mosa. That was a thought too, like they were trying to catfish him essentially. And I'm like, I don't think that's going to happen. That doesn't quite seem to be the case, but we'll see how that goes. But I wanted to put kind of this cockamamie thing out there. I don't fully think it's going to be real, but I like the idea, and it would be fun if something ended up getting used from it. not that Oda would ever see it, but like it might end up being something that ends up getting somehow used in the manga and in the story, which would be great. So that's what I have. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye.